It all started with a knock on the door that sounded a little too official. My sister had been home alone when two men showed up dressed like they belonged to some homeowners association. They wore clean polo shirts with fake wall logos, had clipboards in hand, and even carried ID badges that looked convincing at first glance. Their act was flawless, almost. They spoke with confidence, using legal-sounding terms about property compliance checks and mandatory inspections. The way they stood, their calm tone, and the fake smiles on their faces could fool anyone. But what they didn't know was that we don't even have an WA in our neighborhood. That was the first red flag, but my sister didn't notice it right away. They told her there had been complaints about something on our property and that they needed access to the backyard. When she hesitated, they became slightly pushy, insisting it was part of their routine process. She didn't want trouble, so she opened the door just a little to talk. That's when their true intentions became clear. One of the men suddenly stepped closer, trying to wedge his foot in the doorway, and demanded she let them in. My sister, being strong-willed, refused. But before she could shut the door, one of them grabbed her arm hard. She screamed and tried to pull back, but he twisted her wrist so violently that it cracked. These men weren't WA officers, they were predators with a plan. What makes it terrifying is how real they looked. Their fake badges, their fake paperwork, and even a fake business card, they had thought this through. This wasn't some random burglary, it was a well-organized con disguised as authority. And that's what makes stories like this so dangerous. People trust uniforms, titles, and badges without thinking twice. Little did they know, the second they touched my sister, they crossed a line they would regret forever. Because while they thought they had picked the perfect target, they had no idea whose family they were messing with. The moment their hands closed around her wrist, everything escalated from tense to terrifying in seconds. My sister, who had only cracked the door open to be polite, now found herself in a nightmare. The taller one, who had been smiling just moments earlier, suddenly yanked her arm with such force that it made her stumble forward. She tried to scream, but the shock and pain stole her breath before the sound could escape. Then came the crack, that sickening, sharp sound no one ever forgets. Her arm wasn't just twisted, it was broken. She said the pain shot through her body like electricity, making her knees buckle. The guy didn't care, he didn't even flinch. Instead, he tightened his grip and barked, "Stop fighting." As if she was the problem. Her mind raced. Why was this happening? These men weren't here for an inspection, they were here to hurt her. She tried to pull away, her free hand clawing at the doorframe, but the second man joined in, grabbing her shoulder and shoving her deeper into the doorway. They were trying to force their way inside. That was their goal all along. The fear she felt in that moment, she later told me, wasn't just about the pain. It was the helplessness. She realized they could do anything to her, and no one would know until it was too late. Her phone was just out of reach, sitting on the kitchen counter. She could see it, but couldn't get to it. And the men, they were ruthless, completely focused on overpowering her. But they underestimated her spirit. Even with her arm throbbing and useless, she fought like hell. She screamed as loud as she could, long, piercing screams that carried through the street. The sound startled them for a split second, and that second changed everything. Because those screams didn't just echo in the air, they triggered the chain of events that would flip the entire situation upside down. What they didn't know was that I was just 3 minutes away, with backup. Armed backup. And when I got that call and heard her scream through the phone, something inside me snapped. These men had no idea the storm they just unleashed. 3 minutes doesn't sound like much, but when someone you love is in danger, it feels like forever. When I got her call, cut off by that blood-curdling scream, I didn't hesitate. I didn't even hang up properly. I hit the sirens, stomped the accelerator, and let the adrenaline take over. Every second mattered. 3 minutes. That was all it took for me to turn into something primal. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear the radio chatter. Dispatch was already alerting my team. We weren't talking. We didn't need words. Everyone knew this wasn't a drill, this was personal. As I rounded the last corner into our street, I saw the door wide open, swinging like a broken jaw. And then I saw her, my sister, slumped on the floor, clutching her arm, tears streaking her face. Her eyes met mine, full of pain and fury all at once. And behind her, those two imposters froze like deer in headlights. That was their last moment of freedom. Before they could even move, I was out of the car, weapon drawn, barking orders so loud the neighborhood windows shook. Down. Now. My voice wasn't mine anymore. It was steel, it was rage, it was the promise of hell if they didn't comply. They hesitated for a split second, probably thinking they could talk their way out. Big mistake, because that's when the rest of my team screeched in, tires burning, doors flying open. 5 black SUVs blocking every exit. Armed men pouring out like a tidal wave of justice. SWAT gear gleaming, rifles locked, boots pounding the pavement. 3 minutes ago, they thought they were in control. Now, they were prey surrounded by predators. And the best part, they still had no idea who I was, why I had that kind of firepower at my fingertips. To them, I was just a furious brother. They didn't know they had just tangled with someone who doesn't play defense. I walked right up to them, muzzle steady, pulse like ice. "You picked the wrong house," I said. And as they dropped to their knees, faces pale, I knew. Those 3 minutes had just rewritten their entire lives. The moment the first SUV screeched to a halt, the entire street transformed from a quiet suburban block into a fully locked down war zone. Tires smoked, doors flew open, and within seconds, men in full tactical gear flooded the scene. Helmets on, rifles up, movements sharp and synchronized. This wasn't a casual police response. This was precision, power, and controlled chaos. I didn't even have to give a second command. My team knew the drill. They fanned out in perfect formation, securing angles, shouting commands that boomed through the neighborhood like thunder. Hands up. Face down. Now, the imposters, those fake wah clowns who thought they were in control, looked like their souls had left their bodies. All that fake confidence drained out of them the second they saw red dots dancing across their chests. One of them stammered something like, "This is a misunderstanding," but he didn't get far. A steel boot sent him to the pavement before the sentence could finish. Zip ties snapped around his wrists as his face kissed the asphalt. The other guy, he tried to make a move. Bad idea. My sergeant had him pinned so fast, it was like watching a wolf take down prey. Neighbors peeked through curtains, phones recording, dogs barking. It was a full-blown spectacle. And me, I stood there, watching it all with a fury I didn't bother hiding. These men had dared to put hands on my sister. They thought they were going to walk in, intimidate, maybe rob us, maybe worse. Instead, they were eating dirt with assault rifles inches from their heads. The scene was intense, but the team moved like a machine, methodical and ruthless. Weapons cleared, suspects immobilized, perimeter locked. In less than 60 seconds, the street was ours. My sister, still clutching her broken arm, watched through tear-filled eyes as the men who hurt her were reduced to nothing more than trash on the curb. And here's the thing. They still didn't get it. They didn't know who had brought this storm down on them. But they were about to find out. Because I wasn't just a brother, I was the guy who calls the shots. And in my world, you don't hurt family. The sound of Velcro straps tightening around wrists and boots crunching on asphalt is something you don't forget. When my team finished their lightning-fast sweep, those two imposters were no longer fake WA officers. They were just two broken men lying face down on the scorching pavement, breathing hard like cornered animals. The street was silent except for the faint hum of idling engines and the clatter of tactical gear. Neighbors had gathered at their windows, phones raised, mouths hanging open in shock. A quiet suburban block had just turned into the set of an action movie, and these two clowns were the unwilling stars. One of them whimpered something about not meaning any harm, but the zip ties on his wrists told a different story. His cheek was pressed so hard against the asphalt that I could hear the grit grinding under his teeth. The other guy, he didn't say a word. Maybe he thought silence would earn him mercy. Spoiler alert, it wouldn't. I stood over them, every ounce of fury I had pulsing through my veins. My sister was behind me, cradling her broken arm, tears streaking her face. I wanted them to see her. I wanted them to remember the pain they caused before they spent the next decade staring at gray walls. "You see this?" I barked, my voice cutting through the heavy air like a blade. "You touched her, you hurt her, and now look at you, face down in the street like the trash you are." No one moved, not my team, not the neighbors, not even the wind. It was as if the whole world froze to let those words sink in. Then I crouched down low, close enough for them to feel my breath, and said the line that would haunt them forever. "You picked the wrong house." Their eyes flicked sideways, and for the first time, I saw real fear. Not the fake bravado they wore when they knocked on that door. This was raw, bone-deep terror. And honestly, good, because that fear was the only thing keeping them breathing right now. As my team hauled them up and shoved them into the armored van, I glanced back at my sister. She gave me a weak nod, her strength shining through the pain. And I promised myself this: anyone who even thinks about coming after her again will end up the same way. Face down, humiliated, and begging for a second chance they'll never get.